really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Hey, thanks for joining me here today for another episode. I'm going to be answering the question today, what is integrity? As you know, I've been working my way through a list of questions I found that are the most frequently Googled questions about life. So I've been looking at many of those, trying to answer them myself. Not that I'm any expert on any of this, only answering them from what I have learned and what I am learning right now in the process of my life. And hoping that maybe that will stimulate you to think about your own answers to these questions. So I really like the idea of looking at the word integrity. That's a word that's been important to me for much of my life. I value the idea of integrity, and I always have, and I've sought to live my life with integrity. Though at some point along the way, there were many years when I just assumed that I have integrity because I care about it, and I make an effort to try to align what I do and how I behave with what I believe and what my values are, which I think is the basic definition of integrity. But over time, I came to have a deeper and broader understanding of what integrity really is. So that's why I want to get into this conversation just a little bit, and it will partly reflect upon some things that I talked about last week, knowledge versus wisdom. I'm going to go back and revisit a little bit of that conversation from last week. So I want to start with the definition of integrity, or at least the origin of the word integrity. It comes from the Latin word integer, which means whole or complete, undivided. And so this is a really good place to start thinking about integrity, meaning when we are completely intact and whole and together within ourselves. So as I said before, our actions line up with our values and our beliefs. And I think of it as our mind and our heart and our hands being in alignment. So what we say we believe is how we behave, and what we do and what we actually bring into the world. And it's actually harder to act with integrity than we may think. It may seem like, well, I'm basically an honest person. I try not to lie to people. I try to do what I say I will do and live up to my word. But it's many times more difficult than we imagine it could be to live according to our values, because sometimes we ourselves are divided internally. We think about what we value. Sometimes we're being told what to value by authority figures in our lives that we follow or listen to, and that's particularly if our level of consciousness is at the traditional level. We're being told what we should believe and what we should value, and we ascribe to that, but we may not be very good at actually looking at our own behavior in the world. We may not be very good at reflecting on, how do I act? How do I speak? How do I treat other people? Sometimes it's very hard for us to see that. We live inside our own heads, and so we know what we think we should do, and we know what we hope we do, but we may not be good at actually stepping outside of ourselves and evaluating, how do I actually show up in the world? How do I actually behave, and what do I do and say when I'm around other people? And also, how do other people receive me? How do they look at me? How do they feel about the way that I behave in the world? And so if I say it's my intention to treat my neighbor with love and kindness, that may not be enough, because I may then assume that everything I do toward my neighbor comes from my love is a kind action toward them, but without being able to perceive how my behavior affects my neighbor and how they receive it, how it comes across to them, I may be missing the mark. I may want to be acting with love and kindness, but I may, in my ignorance, be doing something that actually offends them or actually is not helpful to them, even though I think it is. So what I want to explain about integrity is that part of it is being able to look more deeply. It isn't just saying, I value kindness and therefore it's my intention to be kind to people. And from there, moving on saying, great, I have integrity. I'm a good person. It's important that we be able to step back, take a look at the bigger picture and see if the behavior that we are assuming is kind actually is considering the needs and the welfare of another person and taking that into account in our behavior. So one of the ways that we get tripped up sometimes when we're trying to act with integrity, we're trying to be good people in the world, trying to do the best we can, is that we don't actually know or perceive that we have some hidden wounds in our own shadow, that we're carrying with us some anger and resentment and negativity from the past that we've actually hidden away. And we may be lying to ourselves about some of these deep inner issues that we're carrying, some of our baggage. We may not be completely honest with ourselves and looking at all of those inner issues that we're carrying. And when that happens, when we have a lot of big shadow issues that are part of us that we're in denial about and refusing to look at, then those shadow issues can sometimes rise up and interfere with how we behave toward other people. So I may intend to say something kind to my neighbor, but it may come across with sarcasm or with a negative tone that is actually hurtful to my neighbor. I might say the right words, but I might say it in a way that actually reveals that I don't 100% feel the kindness that I'm trying to speak to my neighbor. I'm not fully clear about it inside. I'm divided inside myself because I have an old shadow wound that means I actually have resentment toward my neighbor. I'm actually kind of angry at my neighbor for some reason. If I'm not aware of that anger, if I'm not able to look within myself and see it, then I may think like, oh, look, I'm smiling. I did something nice for my neighbor, but that so-called kind act may have a dagger hidden inside of it. Like there may be an ulterior motive behind the behavior that looks like kindness that is designed to somehow get revenge or somehow cause pain for my neighbor, and I might be completely unaware of that. I may not see the hidden daggers in my own behavior. That was quite true of me in the past. I was in a lot of denial about how much anger I carried toward other people and how much resentment I built up, particularly for certain coworkers in my life. I couldn't face it. I couldn't look at it. I didn't want to admit that I was capable of carrying so much negativity or so many hurtful thoughts and emotions deep inside of me. So I was blind to it. And I honestly did not recognize that when I tried to do something supposedly nice for my coworker, there was hidden within it anger that my coworker could feel, not even understand. The coworker didn't know, like, how come she did something for me that was supposed to be nice, but I feel bad about it. I came away from it feeling something negative. It's confusing for the people that we encounter when we ourselves are in denial about what we're hiding deep within us, deep within our own shadows. So as I say, I valued integrity for a long time, but I've had to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of work on myself. And I've had to really open up my shadow and take a look at all of the deep issues that were there. And as soon as I did that, my mind was filled with memories of things I did and said in the past that came from that shadow, though at the time, I didn't know it. I didn't know that I was kind of being sabotaged in my intentions by my own unhealed wounds that I was carrying within me, and unrecognized wounds. So I've spent a lot of years doing work on those inner issues, on the shadow issues and the shadow pain that I'm carrying, in order to resolve as much of it and heal as much of it as I can, but at the very least to be aware of it, so that when I'm in situations, I can now recognize, like, whoa, something's coming up inside of me, something negative. I feel some anger, I feel some hurt, I feel rejection, I feel fear. It's coming up from someplace deep inside of me. That's a shadow issue. And as soon as I feel that or recognize it, I can stop myself and back off a little bit, like, wait a minute, am I clear about why I'm doing this? Is there some kind of hidden shadow agenda or motive behind my behavior? And does what I'm thinking I'm going to do or say, does it line up with what I really value and believe and care about? Or does it have hidden daggers inside of it coming from my shadow? I'm able to stop myself pretty quickly in the moment and take a look at all of that so that I can get as clear as possible before I act. So the more I have been able to open up my own shadow and look within, the more I feel I am able to operate from greater integrity. And that's my goal, to have as much integrity as possible. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. I have a quote that I wanted to read from Spencer Johnson, which is, he says, I like this: integrity is telling myself the truth, and honesty is telling the truth to other people. So we have to begin by telling ourselves the truth about ourselves. And that truth is, all of us have wounds that we're carrying from childhood, from adolescence, from throughout our entire lives, wounds that we haven't been able to understand or explore or heal yet. And those wounds can sabotage us when we are trying to behave with as much integrity as possible. So if we want to increase our integrity, we have to be willing to look deep inside and to explore the depths of that shadow and re-experience the pain that's hidden there. And Nelson Mandela has a somewhat similar quote. He says, "The first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. Great peacemakers are all people of integrity, of honesty, but humility." So he's emphasizing again, you have to work on yourself, and you have to get as clear as possible in your motivations, in your values and beliefs, as pure as you can be, in transmitting those values and beliefs through your behavior to the rest of the world. And be as clear as you can about your own shadow. None of us get rid of our shadow entirely. None of us free ourselves of all of these wounds that we've been carrying. The best we can do is to become aware of what we are carrying with us. What kind of baggage do we have? We keep working on it. Of course, we keep practicing forgiveness and love and working on healing some of those old wounds. But we have to always be aware and be willing to look, because sometimes there are still wounds, I'm sure, I haven't even seen yet that I'm carrying with me. I haven't even recognized them yet. So it's a constant daily work to explore the shadow, look at those wounds, and unearth them. So when I think about integrity as being wholeness, or completeness or being undivided, I think that it means being whole in terms of having incorporated as much of my shadow as possible, because the shadow represents those parts of ourselves that we have separated from, we have rejected, we have decided, not consciously, but made the choice at some point that I don't like this part of myself. I don't like this part of my history, these memories. I don't like the pain that I felt. It's going to get repressed and shut out of my consciousness. It's going to be hidden away deep inside where I don't ever have to look at it again. So we create these divisions within ourselves, divisions in our own awareness of who we are, as a protective mechanism, really, as we're growing up and learning how to be in the world. We protect ourselves from some of the pain of the past by hiding it away. And it makes us less complete, less whole as individuals when we have separated ourselves. We've separated out the parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we don't want to live with, that we don't want to acknowledge, the parts of our past that are sometimes too painful and too traumatic for us to recall. So it's a healthy mechanism in some ways to be able to separate out those issues when we're children in particular, and when we're just beginning to grow. But at some point, when we want to take our consciousness to a higher level, we have to have the courage to begin to explore all of those hidden issues that are present. And last week in my talk on the difference between knowledge and wisdom, I talked a little bit about levels of consciousness. I wanted to emphasize once again that all of us go through various levels of consciousness just as we develop through different stages in our lifetime, through infancy, toddlerhood, preschool age, elementary school age, pre-adolescence, adolescence. Through all of these stages of development, consciousness as well has its own stages, and we develop through those stages. And I talked about just 4 of them last week, being traditional, rational, pluralistic, and then eventually integral. And that's where integral means higher integrity, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to mention again, and going back to last week, that as we talk about these different levels of consciousness, the idea here is not to judge other people for whatever their level of consciousness is, because part of life is growing as much as we can in consciousness, and some of us have more opportunities to grow to greater levels, to expand our consciousness. Some of us are born into situations, or we're gifted situations in our lives that help us expand and grow in our consciousness. Some of us have not had those opportunities. And so the idea is not to judge people who are experiencing different levels of consciousness than we are, because those people don't really have a lot of control over whatever level of consciousness they're at. This is how life has unfolded for them. And it isn't to say that one level of consciousness is necessarily better or more right than another level of consciousness. People grow to whatever level they're able to in their lifetimes. And so just as we wouldn't say, oh gosh, a toddler isn't nearly as good as a teenager because that toddler hasn't developed as much as the teenager, so the teenager is far more valuable or far better than a toddler. No, we just understand, well, the toddler hasn't had the opportunity to learn and grow as much as a teenager has. So we just accept people wherever they are, whatever level of consciousness they are at. And some people, I know Ken Wilber says that we come here at birth with a set point for our level of consciousness. We bring that with us when we when we incarnate here on the earth, our set point of where our level of consciousness will advance to without trying. And we can go beyond that set point if we work on ourselves. And that's what I'm trying to do, is work on myself. And I'm doing this podcast in case other people want to work on themselves. And I'm just sharing what I've learned along the way, because the way we can help ourselves move to a more expanded level of consciousness is by intentionally working on ourselves, looking at the shadow being one of those tasks we need to do if we want to grow in consciousness. So when we look at those levels again, traditional being the level at which most more, say, fundamental religion resides, because the traditional level is a level where authority is outside of the individual. Authority comes from someone else. So does knowledge and wisdom comes from someone else who teaches you and tells you, or from it's like holy scriptures or books that have been written that you ascribe to and that you assimilate as your wisdom for your life, but it comes from outside the individual. And so individuals adhere to the rules and the expectations and the dogmas of the group to which they belong at the traditional level. The next level beyond that is the rational level. And that's when individuals, in terms of their consciousness, begin to think more for themselves. And this is where science and medicine reside, where there's a desire to use the human mind to think and reason, to use logic and our rational abilities to grow in knowledge, to generate more knowledge, and to explore and expand in what we know in knowledge. And so oftentimes the rational level rejects the information gathered at the traditional level, even though the traditional level is very good at creating values and morals. The rational level may reject some of those values in favor of individual reasoning and being able to use our own mind to explore things and learn as much as possible. And then the next expanded level of consciousness is the pluralistic level, at which there develops sensitivity for others, for other people, for other creatures, for the planet, and an ability to care for more than just myself and what I know and what I'm learning, but to care about others and to sense this connectedness between all beings. And so at the pluralistic level, there may be a new emphasis on spirituality once again, but less connected with individual religions and more about personal spirituality and mysticism at the pluralistic level. Now, the goal is actually to move beyond all three of these levels to the integral level, because when we reach integral, this is the point of being the most whole as possible. At each one of the previous three levels, there's a certain rejection, like the pluralistic level rejects some of the traditional values and rejects the rational thinking of the rational level. And the rational level rejects the mysticism of the pluralistic level and the sensitivity, and also rejects the structure of the traditional level. The traditional level rejects the other two levels. So the three lower levels all conflict with one another and reject each other. But the goal of the integral level of consciousness is to actually bring all three levels together and to take what is the best and the healthiest and the most whole of all three of those previous levels and bring them together and combine them into one person. So if this makes any sense. So I can retain the values and the structure that I had when I was existing in a more traditional consciousness, but I can add to that my own ability to reason and to learn and to gather knowledge and to use science and to study things and to take in lots of information, but also filter through and sort that information and have some discernment about what feels like valid and true information and what feels like it may be somewhat false information. And then I can also explore my own spirituality and my mystical nature without rejecting it as something that came from a lower level of consciousness. I can, in my higher consciousness, explore my own spirituality. I can care about other people. I can join causes and put my energy and effort toward helping other people at that pluralistic level. And when I am at a higher integral level of consciousness, I can figure out how to hold all of those perspectives at the same time within myself, how to be all of those things, how to be traditional, rational, and pluralistic all at the same time. I can bring them all together within myself and create peace and harmony within myself and be more integrated within myself, and therefore have greater integrity. So the more I am in harmony within myself, the more integrated I am, the greater integrity I am able to bring into the world. So to go back to the shadow that I was talking about recently, in order to move from one level of consciousness to the next more expanded level, we actually have to be able to explore the shadow a little bit in order to keep moving to higher levels. And to get to an integral level of consciousness, we have to become very aware of the shadow, because the shadow is the one thing that keeps us divided inside ourselves. The shadow, its pain, the old wounds, the anger and resentment that are all harbored there, that's the one thing that keeps us from expanding our consciousness to the integral level of consciousness, to be more integrated within ourselves, more in balance, more in harmony, more in unity within ourselves, and therefore operating with greater integrity in life. I'm not sure this will make sense to anyone except me, but I just wanted to explain this idea of having integrity, bringing our values and our beliefs, our highest values and beliefs, into harmony with how we act in the world. It's really essential if we want to change the world, if we want to fix some of the problems of the world and make it a better place. We have to behave and live with the highest integrity possible. And it is absolutely necessary that we understand and know our own shadows and how they may influence us, how they may sabotage us as we're trying to be good people in the world. So the more we do shadow work, the more integrity we will have, the more our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, our goals come in alignment with our energy, the energy of our hearts and what we're emanating out to the world, and with the actions of our hands, how we behave, how we treat other people, how we talk to others, what we create in the world, and what we bring forward. So once again, just to reiterate, to have more integrity in the world, you really do have to look at yourself. You have to do inner work. You have to explore your shadow. And I've done some episodes in the past about the shadow. I'll be talking about it again in the future. But right now, the world really needs integrity. And I will tell you this, a few years ago, just out of interest, I started looking at the mission statements and the values statements of major corporations here in the US. And I was amazed how often the word integrity appeared in their mission statements. How many of these big corporations say that they value integrity and they want to behave with integrity in what they do. And yet, every one of those corporations has some sort of a major shadow hidden within them in some of their practices, the way they treat employees, the products that they're producing, and the harm they might be causing in the world. And so there is this hidden shadow within all of these big companies saying they're operating with integrity. They value it. They put it ahead of many, many other values. Integrity is right there at the top. And yet that is not integrity if they haven't explored every aspect of how they do business, of what they're producing in the world, of what they're creating, and how they treat their own customers and their own employees. They do not have integrity. They say they value it, but they do not have it. They are not bringing it to the world. And so the more we as individuals work on our own integrity, and the more we begin to feel empowered, that we understand how it feels when we're in alignment, when we're in harmony, when we're not lying to ourselves, we're not hiding anything from ourselves, we're seeing ourselves with great honesty. The more we have power to step up to sometimes groups and corporations and entities out there who are not living up to their own mission statements and their own values of integrity, the more we can recognize that they themselves are failing to come into the world and act and behave with integrity. And that gives us a certain amount of confidence, actually, to maybe go forward and sometimes confront these organizations that are acting in the world without integrity and to shine the light on them. So there's so much value in doing our own inner work, but we do have to start with ourselves. And Nelson Mandela emphasized that. We can't become peacemakers in the world or change makers if we have not looked within. So I hope this is of some value to you and you'll give that some thought for yourself. How do you feel about integrity? And if you're totally honest with yourself, do you feel that you operate with integrity, or do you need more clarity? Do you need to do a little more work within? I'm betting all of us do. We all need to keep doing our inner work. So I'm here to support that inner work. I'm doing my own, and I'm trying my best to just be honest with you about where I've been, where I am, and where I'm hoping to go in the future to support you in your process and on your journey. So thanks for listening to me today. And I'll be back next week with another episode for you. And until then, take care. Remember that we're here for love. So ultimately, the most integrated thing we can do is love. Just love yourself, love all the parts of you, all the hidden parts, all the painful, wounded parts of you. If you can begin to love all of it, love your shadow, love everything that's hidden there, that will make the biggest change possible. So focus on love, face your fear, be ready for whatever life may bring you next. It's crazy. There will be something. And then just love each and every moment of your life. Bye-bye.